Hi, I'm Simon. I've come from a long, long way away to be with you today. I've come from the Heritage Museum that masquerades as a university, known as Durham. The admission is £9,000 just now, but prices can go up as well as down. Nothing is set in stone, as we know from today. So I've come from Durham, and I also work on German culture there, and I have been working for the past little while on this particular word, a foreign word. I tell you what, we need to close the borders, stop these foreign words coming in. The word is Fernweh, and although it's a bit of a trick of counselling, which you've just been hearing about, I'm going to take you on a journey back to the first time I came across this word, when I was at the University of Oxford, I'm afraid to say. I went to a lecture by the literary detective Professor Horse, and Professor Horse gave this lecture, and at this lecture, just so you're aware, were a number of the coming elite of the British establishment, which I do not count myself. There was, for example, the future stand-up comedian Stuart Lee, the future English Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, and the future Transport Minister, Jeremy Hunt. Now, you may say he's not the Transport Minister, but having fucked up the NHS, he's bound to get a new job on Friday. Some of this material is going to date very quickly. I hope. Anyway, back to the lecture, enough of the political satire. So, Fernweh. Professor Horse had two theses about Fernweh. Firstly, that it was untranslatable. There is no English equivalent for this word. It means literally far hurt. It doesn't mean anything. Okay, that was his first point. His second point was it wasn't used in the German language till the start of the 20th century, he said. Now that's a fair enough point in the mid-80s when Professor Horse had to read books and conduct detective exercises trying to work out what was going on. But we live now, of course, in an era of big data, don't we? Indeed. We have Google. So sometime last week I put Fernweh into Google and it spat me out a graph. I printed the graph out and went to the pub, said that's enough research for 1 week. Okay, but what this graph proves, irrefutably, is that Fernweh was used in 1840. So there you go, Professor Horse. You never thought I'd come to anything. And you were right. But, so I have now proved this, but, we have to still interpret the data. So let's go back to 1840s Germany. Why not? It's a nice place. Well, it's not a nice place. It's a disunited kingdom in so many ways, suffering economic hardship, no freedom of the press, no free speech, and unsurprisingly, therefore, people want to get away. They have a dream of escape, of going to a better country. And that's where this word begins to emerge then, as I say, around the 1840s. And this is, as it were, the positive side of Fernweh, as a form of utopian desire for something better. The opposite to, for example, homesickness, which is a sickness for a home that never existed and never will. We have we have a French word for this in English. It's called la farage. So, that's enough of the graphs. Why not? So the other thing he said was it wasn't translatable. Well, that's also my thesis, that it's not translatable, but it exists across the centuries in German culture. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. The first comes from my analog PowerPoint. I don't know if you can see it there at the back. My analog PowerPoint, which has a picture of Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. You may know him. His most famous work is Faust of Fun, which he wrote with his comedy sidekick Richard Schiller. Now, Goethe was working in Weimar, and he was very bored with his existence. He was just having to churn out scripts week after week for the administration. So he said, I want to get away. And he dreamt of Italy. Italy was his place of Fernweh. And he set off there in search of three things: sun, sand, and the rejuvenation of his creative juices. And he achieved this. And so happy was he that he posted this selfie, which you can see here, on Facebook at the time. Oh dear. Facebook indeed. This selfie shows him amongst the Roman ruins, which were the classical sort of tradition he wanted to go and capture in Italy. He wasn't so interested in the Italians, he thought they were all mucky and unreliable. Not exactly the most open-minded man, traveller of his time. Anyway, so Goethe returned, pumped up, full of passion, back to Germany, where he led German culture with a decisiveness into the 19th century. So that's the positive side of Fernweh, kind of utopian design. Now, as you're probably aware, German history and Fernweh and Germans travelling takes something of a slightly dodgy turn thereafter in the decades which followed. And obviously I now have to obey Cleese's law, which is that you cannot talk about German culture for more than 5 minutes without mentioning... no. Anyway, I'm not going to start that. I'm certainly not going to start that. Anyway, after the Second World War, Germans still loved to travel, but they weren't so welcome in certain places, for reasons which are perhaps understandable. But they still had a desire to go elsewhere. And there was one country which had remained neutral in the Second World War, or several, but one in particular, Ireland. And the German writer Heinrich Böll dreamt of going to Ireland, and he went there, as he saw it as a place of nature from which he'd escape from the economic miracle which was causing thousands of Volkswagens to drive up and down the Autobahn. See how many German words I can get into this set. Anyway, this was his journey, and he wrote about it in his Irish journal. You can still find it today. It has on the cover a pint of Guinness. You'll be surprised to hear, just in case you thought Ireland was about anything else, in case you thought Ireland might be about the fact you can't get an abortion. It's full of homophobia and mass immigration, and Father Ted, of course, as well. He wrote about this. Now, there's one anecdote which I found in my researches which is not mentioned, which is a boozy evening he spent with a future and now former sit-down comedian Dave Allen. Now, over a few jars, they discovered that they both had a love of whiskey and analogue cigarettes. They also had a hatred of the Catholic Church, and they had also a penchant, another German word there, a penchant for travel. Böll, of course, had toured the Soviet Union with the Wehrmacht in the 1940s, and Allen had wandered through the mountains of County Wicklow in the 1940s during the Comedy Wars, which had been instigated by the Catholic Church's attempt to ban condoms in stand-up routines. Now, Allen, as you're probably aware, became a non-dom, living in exile in Britain in the BBC with Terry Wogan. And exile is a much more darker topic, and I don't have time for it, the light's about to flash. But I would like you to take those who don't have the choice to travel, those who are forced to travel. I'd like you to take them with you when you go to the ballot box on Thursday. Thank you very much.
In that particular lesson, we've all now learned a German word which is apparently of no use whatsoever. So that's cool. So Fernweh. Can we all say that? Fernweh. Was that right, Simon? Very good. Oh, very good. Give yourselves a bit of applause, lads. Still don't quite exactly know what the fuck it means, but then again, I come from a country where we've got loads of words that nobody knows what they mean, so not to worry about that.